Tolkien, when he was at Oxford, he, as a professor, he made friends with other professors and other people outside of the university, who all had common interests in writing stories and writing other papers. They used to meet once a week at a little hotel well, matter of fact, a couple of hotels, but the most famous one is the Eagle and the Child. I must admit, I have actually been there and sat in the same corner as they sat in. It was one of my highlights of my life. And the name of the group was the Inklings. And one of the most famous Inklings was also one of Tolkien's best friends, a man called C.S. Lewis, who some of you would be aware is the writer of the Narnia stories. In 1937, the Times newspaper used to have a section for book reviews, and there's a book review within the paper that talks about The Hobbit in glowing terms, and it ends up with a sentence similar to, "One day this could prove to be a classic." And of course, history tells us that the person who wrote that review for The Hobbit was C.S. Lewis himself. I have a copy of the newspaper review. It is very old and fragile, but yes, it's here with us today if you would like to see it.
Talk about how we got it. Oh yeah, so it's an original review, and how did you find this?
I acquired this. It's only part of the newspaper. I acquired it when I was in England from a friend over there who is a book collector and also sells Tolkien memorabilia. And he had a few copies of this newspaper part, and I decided that I wanted to have a copy of it myself. And so I brought it back home with me.
Literature, is that right?
J.R.R. Tolkien has been recognised as the father of epic fantasy. He has been acknowledged as sort of rejuvenating an interest in fantasy literature, which had sort of faded out. And there are a lot of modern day authors, including people like Raymond Feast, George Martin of the Game of Thrones fame, Terry Pratchett of the Discworld fame. They all acknowledge that they were influenced by Tolkien's stories of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. The Lord of the Rings, which we've said was published in 1954, was quite successful, even and to the surprise of the publishers and even to Tolkien. There were a number of reprints of the hardback copies, but it was in the mid-60s that the whole publishing history of The Lord of the Rings would change dramatically. In the United States, at the time of what we today call the Flower Power movement or the hippie movement, a publishing company called Ace Paperbacks, who were renowned for publishing pulp fiction at very cheap prices, published The Lord of the Rings in 3 volumes in paperback. And the artwork on the covers was very hippie-ish or very weird, as though people were on whatever. But the publication of these books made the publication history so much different, because now you had cheap paperback copies available to a wider population. And the students of universities throughout the United States and people involved in the Flower Power movement embraced these books like a Bible. And young people were seen wearing buttons with Frodo lives, Gollum eats goblins, and Gandalf for president. And with this sudden upsurge of popularity of The Lord of the Rings in the United States, there was now a copyright dispute, because in actual fact, Ace did not have the right to produce these books. And so Tolkien's own publishers in United States, Ballantine Books, then published their own versions of The Lord of the Rings in paperback and also The Hobbit in paperback. And the Ace books were taken off the market. Ace publishers paid Tolkien a nice sum of money to settle the copyright dispute, and Tolkien suddenly found himself a rather wealthy man. But he still couldn't get over the fact that people in America were saying a good trip was to read The Lord of the Rings while smoking marijuana. But fans now wanted to meet Tolkien, and you have to appreciate Tolkien he was in his 70s now, so he was an elderly man. People used to come and visit his house in Oxford and gawk, from the front fence and gawking, and every time he come out, people try and take photos. He was getting phone calls from fans in America at 3 o'clock in the morning. And so eventually he packed up with his wife Edith, and they moved to the seaside resort of Bournemouth down on the south coast of England.